I want to read a couple of things to the audience that you've said recently. This is something that you said on television to Howie Kurtz. If we confuse just the rapid-fire exchange of small morsels of information on trivial subjects with real information, then I think we knock the props out from under a really functioning democracy. And then in a speech you gave last week, you ended by saying people are going to ask soon, why did you feed us all this trivial crap when so many terrible things were converging? So you're critical of the way the news has developed.
You've noticed.
I could read more. Yet we've just seen this example. We've got Ahmed. Al Jazeera is covering the uprising. He's up at 2 a.m. watching the live stream from Morocco on Bamboozer. Yeah. We have Twitter coming. Does not this, if not disprove, but push severely against this hypothesis and thesis of yours?
Oh, I don't know. I'm going to take as my text this morning the great Lily Tomlin, who once said, no matter how cynical I get, I can never keep up. And take a look at that glorious picture behind me. I don't know what it was intended to convey, but what it conveys to me is absolute information chaos. Pity that poor androgynous figure in the chair. I don't know if it's male or female. How the hell can they keep up? How in heaven's name? Cindy McCain was talking before about Congo. Let me build on that for one moment. In the summer of 2001, my colleagues and I spent 2 weeks in Congo. We put together a 5-part series that ran over 4.5 hours. It was scheduled to run on September 11th, 2001. For obvious reasons, it did not. We were finally able to run that series in February. I'm getting to 2 points here. Number one, it is in the nature of news that we always tend to focus, as you know, on that which is closest and most relevant to us. We went to Congo because even in 2001, Cindy, you can correct me, I think by then somewhere between 2 and 3 million people had died in the war. That number is now way over 5 million people. And we don't cover it. Why? Because it's too expensive. Because it is in the nature of news today that people are being fed the news that they want rather than the news that they need, because only by giving people what they want, and I'm talking about covering Charlie Sheen, I'm talking about the Casey Anthony trial, I'm talking about all this drivel that you're all familiar with. That is the only way that these so-called mainstream media are still able to maintain their share of audience and make enough money to keep it going. Nobody wants to watch, so we are told, what's going on in Congo. What is happening by virtue of the new media is extraordinary in terms of social exchanges. I think it's been devastatingly damaging to good journalism.
Arianna, is he right?
Actually, what Ted said disproves what Ted said. It's kind of, you're having a little bit of a schizophrenic debate with yourself, because on the one hand, you're attacking what the mainstream media are doing, and I completely agree with you. The trivialization of news, the obsession with Casey Anthony or Balloon Boy or the pastor who was going to burn the Quran. But at the same time, you're attacking social media and the explosion of new media, which is really the only salvation. And let me explain why. Right now, what Ahmed showed is that what is happening is really an explosion of millions of people bearing witness around the world. And we still need great editors. It's not either or. We still need gatekeepers. We still need the village explainers to put it all together and put order on the chaos. But what is coming, what has been awakened, is absolutely remarkable, phenomenal, and changing the world. And oppressive powers know it. Look at China. When, right after the Iran uprising, when social media told the story because CNN and other mainstream media were censored. There was an uprising in China. And what did China do? Having learned from the example of Iran, they actually blocked the internet. They blocked social media. And they took selective reporters from mainstream media to a tour of the uprising to spin them. And what we have seen over the last few years is how much easier it is to spin reporters, to feed them some anonymous official sources. It is much easier to spin them than to spin millions of citizens participating in the democratization of media that Ahmed talked about. And that is really what, for me, is remarkable, plus the fact that, as my compatriot Herodotus said, you cannot enter into the same river twice. So even if there were a golden age of journalism, which I don't believe there was, we cannot return to it. And just one more example about why there was not a golden age of journalism that we are lamenting. Just look at the fact that mainstream media failed to really give us the story about the two major disasters of our time, the invasion of the invasion of Iraq on false information about WMD, false stories on the front page of the New York Times based on anonymous sources from the White House, and the financial meltdown. I mean, there were many honorable exceptions in the mainstream media, but basically, we did not capture the public imagination to the point where we had the truth.
So, Ted, isn't she right? I mean, we may have way too much stuff about the Casey Anthony, and we divert ourselves and read about that. I actually thought the Balloon Boy story was pretty interesting, but we have that. But then when really important things come up, you know, the war in Iraq, the financial crisis, the Arab Spring, it is often, you know, not all of these screens, but there are a couple of them that really get it. You know, and we can pay attention to those couple of screens that really have the right information. Isn't that the new world we're living in? And isn't there a great virtue to it?
You may be shocked to discover that I agree with most of what Arianna has said, but let me focus
on what you disagree with.
On one point in particular that I agree with, and that is the importance of editing. Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at the WikiLeaks story for a moment. Is that journalism in your view? Simply putting out hundreds of thousands of pages of raw information?
Well, the editing of it is certainly journalism. The putting out is a complicated debate.
Precisely. Precisely. In other words, you can dump all the information in the world out there, but you still need the professional editors at the New York Times, at the Spiegel, at the Guardian, who go through that material, put it into some kind of context, separate the wheat from the chaff, determine what is important and what is trivial, and most important of all, try to establish what is accurate and what is not. No one is going to get me to say that the social media are not important in terms of the social change that they generate. But my understanding was we were here this morning to talk about journalism. Mm-hmm. And simply putting out however many cajillion hours of information come out on the social media every day does not constitute journalism. You have to have editors, you have to have reporters, you have to look for accuracy, you have to put things in content. And when, for the most part, you don't know the origin of the information, and you don't know the provenance of the person who is putting it out there, that's a very difficult thing to do. Are we going to have to come to terms with it? Absolutely.
So is what the Huffington Post's doing then the prime example of that? I mean, you're often criticized for being an aggregator, but what an aggregator does is they find stories from around the web and they promote them in a centralized place and they curate them.
Well, actually, we're doing three things. You know, we now have 1,400 professional journalists, if you include our patch 857 digital newspapers. And, you know, since the merger with AOL, I hired another 220 professional journalists. So we're doing real reporting in every area. At the same time, we aggregate, we curate, and even if I was given an unlimited budget, I would still aggregate and curate, because our promise to our readers is that we're going to bring you the best from around the world, whether we produce it, or the New Yorker produces it, or ABC or NBC produces it. That's our promise. But the other thing that we are is a platform, a distribution platform for anyone who clears a quality bar. It's not a free-for-all. Either we give them a password, and 9,000 people have a blogging password because we trust them, or we get hundreds of submissions a day, and if our editors approve them, they appear. And that is incredibly important, just as important as the professional journalism, because we get people's voices from around the world in real time on whatever they're passionate about, whether it's politics or sleep, which is another of our obsessions. We believe we're a sleep-deprived nation, and we like to talk about it, or flat shoes, or whatever it is, whether it's important or trivial, as long as it matters to people.
Is it not true, though, that AOL, your parent company, doesn't have a single foreign journalist?
Well, actually, when you mean actually positioned abroad?
Yeah, actually paid journalists out there reporting outside of the United States.
Well, first of all, the whole AOL content, whether it's MoviePhone and MapQuest or Patch, is under the Huffington Post media group. So there is one kind of media group right now. We don't have station reporters, although we are launching new sections. So we have reporters in the UK, where we launched HuffPost UK, reporters in Canada. We're launching HuffPost France, HuffPost Spain, HuffPost Brazil. In all these countries, we are going to have reporters. We are going to be in 12 countries in the next few months. So this is our way of expanding internationally. But what is so interesting, speaking to Eric Batista here, is to see what is happening at the moment outside this country, both in terms of media and in terms of politics, and how different that is. In terms of, Ahmed talked about objectivity earlier on, in terms of the obsession in this country to divide everything into right versus left. The way of seeing everything in this binary way, as opposed to what is happening, say, in Brazil, where you have a shared national agenda about the importance of moving people out of poverty into the middle class. Why is that supposed to be a left-wing position rather than a public interested position?
Ted, is going back, I want to talk about the partisanship in a minute, but let's go back to the main point. Is what the Huffington Post's doing, if you were 25 again, and you were going, back into
like
the
me, he means
way beyond my capacity to remember.
But if you're giving advice to a 25-year-old journalist, would you say, the Huffington Post is doing what I envision? Go work there.
Well, let me give some advice to a 27-year-old journalist. Ahmed, I'm talking to you. You are absolutely right when you say that objectivity, pure, pristine, absolute objectivity, is unachievable, unattainable. You are incorrect in the implication of what you're saying, and that is that it should not, therefore, be attempted. What is wrong with so much and I'll just focus on American journalism for the moment today, is that there is no longer any real attempt, and that's what Arianna was referring to. There is no longer any real attempt at objectivity, and that all comes back to the business model of journalism today. The nature of the business model in American journalism today is to give the American public what it wants, not what it needs. And the fact of the matter is that when I was a young foreign correspondent 40 years ago, ABC had 25 or 30 foreign correspondents, men and women who would live in a section of the world covering Africa, as Cindy McCain was bemoaning the fact that we don't do that anymore, covering the Middle East. We had reporters in Cairo, in Beirut, in Moscow, in Johannesburg, in Mexico City, in Buenos Aires, all over the world. You know how many ABC has today? 4, covering that same world. A far more complex place than it was before. And, the attempt at objectivity is what's missing in the world of journalism today. Pure objectivity we can't find. Objectivity is no longer even sought by Fox or MSNBC or any number of radio talk shows. That's the tragedy of American journalism.
I would say, incidentally, that the ultimate pursuit is the truth. I think that's, for me, an even higher pursuit than objectivity. And acknowledging facts are sacred. We all have the right to our own opinions, but not the right to our own set of facts. I mean, that's really, I suppose, what
Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan, and I'm sure that's what you're castigating. But when you talk of, say, foreign correspondents in Afghanistan, let's say now, most of the time they're confined to the green zone. I mean, it's harder and harder for them to get to the equivalent of the green zone in Kabul, right?
It depends on the
I mean, it's harder and harder for them to get out, and many brave ones do. But at the same time, what we're hearing from people who have access to social media, whether in Afghanistan or Iraq or Tunisia or Egypt, is incredibly important. That bearing witness by millions of people is where a lot of my hope in the future goes to. Because self-expression now has become a new source of fulfillment and entertainment for people. Mm-hmm. And that's what is new. That's why a lot of people still cannot believe, why are people spending so much of their time blogging for free, or uploading Facebook videos or whatever for free, or updating Wikipedia entries for free. And the truth is that nobody ever asks, why are people sitting on their couches watching bad television for free? That was supposed to be entertaining.
No. Ted.
Look, if I may, let me just respond briefly. We have always, as journalists, back to the beginning of journalism, whenever the hell that was, we have always, as journalists, gone to individuals for the information that we need for the construction of the stories that we put out. I fully acknowledge, I'm not denying for a moment, that that gathering process has been greatly enhanced and complicated by the fact that we now get input from millions of people, all of whom are saying, here's raw information. The only point I'm trying to make is there is a difference between raw information and simply acting as a conveyor belt for that, and journalism which requires, above all other things, the editing process. You lose the editing process, you don't have journalism, you simply have a random exchange of information which is impossible to check after the fact.
All right, Ted, we can solve this problem in this room right now. Not we, those of you.
If there's any room in which we can solve it, this is it.
Quite literally, because if there are people who could give people what they need and not what they want, it's Google. Google could change its algorithm. And it could say, if there's a news organization that publishes things that we've deemed disreputable, they did something like this for content farms in this past year, which has made the internet much cleaner, they could downgrade it. They could also set it up so that if you've read a bunch of stories on Drudge Report, your stories in the Daily Kos are linked higher. They could set it so that you limit partisanship. They could set it so that you get, what you need, not what you want. Should they do that?
Wouldn't be a bad idea, but it's... See how easy it is? You've solved the problem already.
Done. All right, well, thank you very much.
Actually,
Arianna, right?
I think we have a bigger problem, which is that the most precious commodity we all have is our attention. Mm-hmm. And even if you had more of those amazing documentaries that Ted has done, like the one on the Congo, which was 4.5 hours, that wouldn't be enough to capture the public imagination in a way that would change public policy. What we need is really the constant repetition of something. Mm-hmm. And it's really the difference between ADD and OCD. And basically, old media suffer from ADD. They do the big 4.5-hour documentary, and then they move on. Mm-hmm. Or they break the big story on the front page of the New York Times on corruption here or there, or on the mining disaster, and they move on. And what we in new media are good at is we suffer from OCD. We suffer from obsessive-compulsive disorder. We pick a story and we stay on it, and we develop it in small ways and large, and we have other people from around the world adding to it, and we gather information, and we edit the information.
Where do I find that interminable series on Koppel?
Well, well, we haven't done it on Congo, but we've done it, for example, on unemployment. We've done some of the best coverage, if I may say so, of stories of the unemployed. We even put it out in an e-book now.
What have you done on why we have 100,000 troops in Afghanistan?
We've done an amazing amount of that.
And what's the answer?
And let me just tell you why. What is the answer? The answer is the weakness of the Obama administration that felt that it had to show strength. It had to show that its credentials as an operation that actually could demonstrate its bona fides in terms of national security.
I think that's a political point of view. I think it has nothing to do with the facts on the ground. We are, just to start a lovely argument with you, I would contend that we are in Afghanistan with 100,000 troops, not because there may still be 50 Al-Qaeda members left in Afghanistan, not because we are concerned about the welfare of Afghan women, but because there is a highly unstable country next door, Pakistan, that has 100+ nuclear warheads and a thriving, as we heard earlier, a thriving Islamic fundamentalist movement. And there is the fear that what we are going to see someday is 9/11 on steroids. That's why the Bush administration and now the Obama administration have left all those troops there. I don't see anything on that.
Well, and actually, I would completely disagree with you, and so would George Will, and so would Richard Haas.
Oh, well, in that case, I'd better drop the idea.
What I'm saying is that... No. My point is that many people who you see on the right of the political spectrum or across the political spectrum, whether George Will or Richard Haas from the Council on Foreign Relations, would tell you that our presence there, our 100,000 troops there, destabilize the situation, destabilize Pakistan, make it more likely that we are actually losing hearts and minds, that we are encouraging the creation of more terrorists. And so the truth is that by being there, because of the cowardice of the Obama White House, because of its political motivations, we are actually destabilizing the region.
You're waking them up now, Arianna.
So are you, Ted. So are you.
Look, I'm not disagreeing with you about whether what the Obama administration is doing is accurate or not, whether it is going to work or not. What I'm saying is the reasons we are being given, both in the modern media and in the more traditional, well, in the more traditional media, they barely touch on the subject at all. What they're giving us is not accurate. Those are not the reasons why we have 100,000 troops there. Right. You can argue about the effectiveness of those 100,000 troops. That's a different subject altogether. But why are they there? Why are we now going to replace the 47,000 troops that we're pulling out of Iraq with an embassy that's going to have up to 20,000 people in it, the largest embassy in the universe? When's the last time you saw anything? Actually, you did run something.
Right. We did. We actually.
Ted and Arianna, we've got a yellow light, and the yellow light suggests that we won't be able to solve our involvement in Afghanistan and Iraq before the panel ends. Try as we might.
But let me just make one more point about that, which is that the fact that even Ted noticed that we are obsessing about Iraq and Afghanistan shows that it's working. That our whole campaign about rethinking Afghanistan and what it really means has been daily. And that's really the point I was making. It's not enough to just do, OCD. It's not enough to just do the one big story. And also my mentioning of George Will, which we had as a headline called Beyond Left and Right, is to demonstrate that the reflexive, obsolete, knee-jerk way in which people in the media look at every political issue as right versus left is both wrong and makes it harder for us to find solutions.
All right, I'm going to wrap up with one last question for each of you. Arianna, I'll start with you, which is, you foresaw where we were going with blogs, but there are lots of people, including my old employers at Wired Magazine, who say the web is dead, and Nick Denton recently said that blogs are dead. So what's coming?
I think what's coming is that basically either you're going to be at the table in new media or you're going to be on the menu. Mm-hmm. And if you're on the menu,
Ted be on the menu?
If you're going to be on the menu, it means you're just going to be feeding social networks everywhere. In order to be at the table, you got to have some kind of differentiator, like some kind of attitude, some kind of clarity about what are you doing to news. Is it just commodity news? Because commodity news is everywhere. Or is there a sort of special, not point of view in terms of political point of view, but a special kind of what Ted called yesterday at lunch whimsical. You know, is there some drama, some whimsy, some obsession that actually defines who you are as a news brand? And news brand both in politics and in living and in every other aspect that we cover. And one last thing, which is that the social graph is clearly owned by Facebook, although Google Plus is doing an amazing job with the circles. I think the interest and the passion graphs are still up for grabs.
All right. Ted, my last question for you.
You don't get a last question. There's a red light there. So I'm just...
Quickly.
Yes, go ahead.
If Google doesn't agree to your suggestion to tweak its algorithm, should the FCC regulate them the way that you were regulated here at Nightline?
Dear man, the FCC is a toothless tiger. The FCC over the last 20 years has not suspended a single broadcasting license, not one. Although some of the outrages that are being committed on local stations and yes, on the networks too, are so great that a little bit of suspension wouldn't be a bad idea. Let me finish on one point.
Fire away.
About 20 years ago, when Nightline was at its heyday, I ended up coming to Cleveland, Ohio, to work at the local affiliate and help promote the program. And they had gathered a group of about 50 young ladies who were wearing nightshirts that said, intriguingly, I thought, although not necessarily with the best of taste, and they were promoting Nightline, "Go to bed with Ted." These days, as we know, we wake up with Arianna.
All right, thank you very much. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.